Hi, welcome to this session on tailoring instruction to meet unique student needs and differentiated instruction. And this is a session where we will look into answering what does that mean? What is differentiated instruction? Because we hear that word all the time. Does that mean special education? Does that mean something else? Who is this for? What does it mean? That's what we're here to do. I'm Michael Kennedy, professor of special education from the University of Virginia. Thank you for being part of this learning event. Thank you for attending this specific session. Photoed here with my wife and two of my kids. My oldest daughter refuses to go to sporting events, so she'd sooner be caught dead than photographed in this way. But that's just how it goes sometimes. All right, so as you know, our work as special educators, whether we're teachers, administrators, paraeducators, we have some family members watching this, the work is difficult. Our field is confusing. And one of the things that's really confusing about it, as I alluded to with my opening, is how much jargon we have. And these words like differentiated instruction, and specially designed instruction, just special ed in general, learning styles. What do any of these mean? What's real? Throw universal design for learning in there. We have a ton of confusion around our roles. We have a lot of confusion around what am I supposed to do to help support these kids with disabilities and others who struggle in the classrooms. So I'm going to use this concept throughout this talk that we're at a restaurant, okay, and we're hungry. We've got a menu in front of us. It's an ample menu. And with guidance from the wait staff, we're going to order what we're hungry for. And what I mean is we're going to order specific instructional practices and approaches for our kids with disabilities based on what their appetite calls for, which will depend upon the situation. The situation being what age, grade, unique needs of that child call for. Okay? So this is going to be what I return to throughout this session as sort of an anchor to keep it real. One of the things you know about when you go to restaurants is you can't order everything on the menu, okay? There's just too much. And at some restaurants, you sit down, you open up the menu, and I'm not really hungry for any of this. Or what I want isn't offered here. Okay, now, why did you go there in the first place? we'll talk about that. But this happens, right? You sit down and all of a sudden, it sounded good. Let's go. Or you're on vacation, or you're on, some other restaurant away from home you don't really know. You sit down, you're not familiar, and this doesn't look, I'm not sure what to do now. So we're going to talk about that. All right, so let's dive in and talk about some of these confusing terms. And we'll spend most of our time, of course, talking about differentiated instruction because that's what this session is about. First, I want to talk about the confusing reality around what we call learning styles. I'll talk in a minute, but this is largely a well-disseminated myth in our field. We all have learning preferences, but learning styles, like I learn a certain way, that's not exactly how the brain works. So we're going to tackle that. I want to talk about universal design for learning, or UDL, which is its own framework for creating and designing instruction. This certainly is something that is very relevant for us in special education. I want to talk about SDI, specially designed instruction. This is the gold standard of what we expect in special education. And then we have this, dangling thing, this differentiated instruction. What is it? Is it the same thing as specially designed instruction? Is it the same thing as universal design for learning? What is it? How do I do it? Am I supposed to do it? Where does it fit? That's what we're going to talk about. let's see if we can bring some clarity to these terms and talk about what your role should be, regardless of what your role is in the school, whether you're a teacher, administrator, paraeducator, or some other role that supports kids. So hopefully we can see the forest and not just focus on those pesky trees that keep us occupied. Okay, so let's jump in with the confusing reality around what we call learning styles. You've all heard of this. You might even have said the words, my learning style is kinesthetic. My learning style is music, or I'm a visual learner. I'm a hands-on learner. I'm a kinesthetic learner. Well, this term and what it implies has stubbornly endured in our field over the years. And there really isn't any empirical evidence to support that individuals have a unique learning style unto themselves. It's a little bit nuanced here in the language, and I want to jump into this. But saying I'm a kinesthetic learner, I'm an auditory learner, I'm a visual learner, yeah, all of that, that's not quite right. That's not quite accurate. So let me jump in. People learn in a variety of ways. We learn through experience of all types, through observation, through feedback that I receive, through study, reading, hands-on, through music. The universe are things that teach me and ways that I learn. And I have preferences within those. If I have a choice between sitting down and opening a book and reading it or listening to a lecture of the same thing, I have a preference. If I have an option between, doing something hands-on in a science lab or reading about it, I have a preference, right? But those preferences are just that. What happens upstairs in terms of how we access information through our visual, auditory, and tactile inputs, the brain always does the same thing in terms of updating the existing schemas for various content and phenomena that we have in long-term memory. It's not actually in the back of your brain, but that just makes sense for visual. We're always trying to update these schemas in long-term memory, which are connected to our active working memory capacity that we get through our major inputs. And if you were at my keynote where I talked about cognitive load theory, you've got a little bit of more insight on this. So various stimuli and environmental actions facilitate how we access information in our inputs and working memory, and then make connections to hopefully update long-term schemas, which is what learning is. Now, some processes, as I am learning, work better under some circumstances than others, and it works better for some students than others. And this is where the learning styles myth comes from and how it endures, because there are differences in how people learn ultimately, especially kids with disabilities. Okay, but this does not mean the student has a special style that works best for them, because what's happening in terms of the brain activity isn't different. Okay, it may be impaired or work differently a little bit, for individuals with disabilities, but even if it is impaired, it's still doing the same thing. You still have to access the information, have it run through working memory, and then connect to long-term memory and update the schemas. Okay, so again, I've got preferences on how I prefer this to happen, but not a specific style that's me. Okay. What I encourage you to do, this is the stubborn weed that grows no matter what, and that's what learning styles is, especially amongst the ivory tower brass, of whom I represent here today. Thinking about the words we use. So swap out the word style with preference. A learning preference, that's legit. No argument from me, okay? Because I've got my preferences too. And understand that the lay person that you interact with, and this could include your colleagues, they are pretty tied to this. Okay, this is a very sexy, very seductive idea. That's how this weed keeps growing. This learning styles myth has kept going because it is hard to get rid of, because this is just what people believe. Because it makes sense. It's logical, but there's no empirical brain evidence to support it. We don't want to be like her on the airplane, yelling at people. That's not real. There's plenty of people doing that. You don't want to do that. That's only going to lead to arguments and, putting people off. You don't want to do that. My apologies to this young lady if she's watching this. I don't mean to pick on you, but it was fresh in my mind and I thought it was funny. So that's that. Let's talk about Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. So this is another idea that has caught on. This has been around for a good 20 years, if not 25 years, and remains popular, especially with teachers, and there's a good reason for it. This framework, this isn't a practice. This is an important distinction. So when I talk about explicit instruction, that's a practice. Okay, it has certain steps and components, and I can define it. UDL is not that. UDL is a framework that helps us to think about, in fact, I have it on the next slide here. It's a good way to conceptualize, design, and deliver instruction for a diverse audience of students. That's not really the same thing as a practice. Okay, it meshes with practice. It helps me to think about how to design it, how to deliver it, how to evaluate it, and that's what you see here on this slide. So the multiple means of engagement, so different ways to motivate kids, stimulate interest, keep them going. Multiple means of representation, giving kids different ways to learn information by presenting it in different ways. And then multiple means of action and expression, so different ways for kids to show what they learn. I am a supporter of Universal Design for Learning and of UDL. I've criticized it in talks I've given before and in readings, saying it's just not specific enough. Okay, it's not specific enough for special education. If you leave it at its face value. Let me explain. The U in UDL is universal. That means everybody. That means I'm thinking about the whole class. I'm thinking about how can I provide these multiple options for kids to be engaged, show what they learn, keep them hooked in. That's all terrific. No argument from me. Teachers who have bought into UDL and my colleagues around the country who are bought in and leading the research and support of this, I am 100% on board with this plan. My point, and I'll make it to you today, is as special educators, which I am, and I know if you're watching this, you either are a special educator or you're a family member or tangential close enough. Your job is to provide an individualized education that is documented in the IEP, specific for a specific student. Okay? So I can use UDL design principles along with specially designed instruction, which can include evidence-based practices or high-leverage practices to support student outcomes. That's great. But saying I'm just doing UDL, I'm giving kids lots of different choices, I'm giving kids, I'm presenting information in different ways, that's not quite it. That's not specific enough unless you go that next step. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this talk. UDL at the restaurant looks delicious. Okay, it is a very tempting menu item to help me think about what I want to order and how I'm going to support students. But using my metaphor, UDL is like light apps. Okay, that's filling. Okay, sometimes I'm hungry for light apps. I want my basket of fries. Okay, I want it. I'm going to order it. In fact, it's giving me an idea for after I'm done recording this. But my kids with disabilities, the kids with IEPs, they need a full meal. Okay? They're not going to get by with light apps. They need to pair the apps with something more substantive. And that's my argument here. So let's jump in and talk about differentiated instruction and how differentiation can help bring UDL to life. So differentiation and UDL are very similar in a lot of ways. It means the teacher is responding to and changing instruction to meet the needs of students rather than forcing or assuming everybody learns the same way. And we know as special educators, kids absolutely do not all learn the same way. So we need to be ready to differentiate. We need to be ready to provide multiple options for kids to succeed. And to do this, I need to be a little bit like a detective, so I can help to figure out what the students' needs are. And one of the ways that I do that, if you attended or will attend my session on high leverage practices during this conference, is high leverage practice number 4, where I use multiple sources of information to develop a comprehensive understanding of students' strengths and needs. And what that really means is I want at the restaurant a combination of foods. I don't want a salad with just lettuce. I want a salad with French fries in it, for one. I'm still on that. And other vegetables too, I guess, if there's room. But I definitely want those fries. And I use all of this information across a range to make good decisions about a student. And that's what I mean about being a detective. That's what being a good teacher is all about, is understanding our students, what do they need. And that's what differentiation is about. So I need to think about, as I provide content to kids, how do I differentiate the content that I'm providing to them? So is what I'm teaching out of the standards, out of the curriculum, to what extent is this appropriate for students' functioning levels? Well, I can get that information out of a student's IEP. It should be in there. But I also have access to this information through, present level and other assessments that I'm giving to students. I also need to think about different ways, differentiate the process of teaching. So this is, again, just like UDL, right? Where I'm thinking about, I can't just stand up in front of the class and talk every single day. That's not going to get it done. That's not differentiation. That's not UDL. That's probably just garbage. Okay, but I want to think about ways that I can get kids working and thinking and being critical, working in teams, but also some lectures okay. So it's thinking about what combination of teaching makes sense. That's what differentiation is all about. I differentiate the products that make sense for kids to show that they've learned. Okay, because we know kids with disabilities, often they have learned, but the measures that we use, the assessments we give them, they don't do well on those. And they don't reflect what they really know and what they're really able to do. So this so far, in terms of differentiation, is really very similar to the Universal Design for Learning framework. Thinking about the learning environment. So kids learn best across different settings, across different modalities. And as I was saying, this connects to multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression. So they're really quite similar to one another. So if you feel like, I know a little bit about UDL already, this content about differentiation should fit right in with your understanding. If you know a little bit about differentiation and not a lot about UDL, here's a good entry point for you to think about what that instruction can entail. One of the best ways to get ready to provide universally designed or differentiated instruction is to conduct profiles of kids. What is their current knowledge base? What is their interest? Kids with autism, this is always easy to know because it's what they perseverate on, but excuse me, not always. And discovering student interests is often very beneficial for planning instruction, gaining and maintaining student engagement, because this will really help them. So if I know my students well, I learn about them from my colleagues, from family members that we work with, I'm going to be in a good position to make informed decisions about what they need to support their learning or behavioral goals. And again, tossing back to my lecture that I delivered, or you are yet to watch, on high leverage practices, it connects really nicely because HLP number 1 is to collaborate with professionals to increase student success. High leverage practice number 3 is collaborate with families to support student learning and secure needed services. And high leverage practice number 6 is to make data-driven decisions. So as I think about my role as a special educator, I'm always thinking about what do my colleagues know? What are they good at? How do they understand this kid across different settings that can help me put together an instructional plan and a behavioral plan that will really help them succeed? What can I learn from the family members that will do the same? Because they have unique insights that we at school often don't have access to. And then everything I should do, I want to be driven by data. And that's really what special education is all about. I'm not just making things up that feel right or seem right. I want to collect careful data from student performance and then know, oh, this is working. Let's keep doing it. This isn't working the way we intended. Let's try something different. Throughout differentiation and understanding this, the student is the focus, not us. Okay? So I'm thinking about how can I focus on this kid and their unique needs and then give them tasks, give them instruction, give them tasks, give them assessments that help give them the best chance to succeed. I don't want to treat assessments that I give to kids like an event. And I say this in the other lecture. We do this all the time. We treat assessment like something we do on Friday afternoons or we do at the end of the school year for accreditation and accountability purposes. It is, but assessment is far more than that. And I want to think about creative ways that go beyond what we normally do in order to provide, understand kids' performance. So to do that, I've got to give kids a range of opportunities to work in whole groups, small groups, individual, so that they have a chance to succeed and show what they've learned. And this is what I was talking about a minute ago. I don't need this slide. We've got 2 slides to say the same thing. That we treat assessment like the chance that it is to demonstrate learning. Because if I only give them one mode and they don't do well on that mode, I may incorrectly say, oh, they didn't learn it, they don't know it. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it is. But it's good to give them multiple chances. In the differentiated classroom, teachers draw from a range of instructional materials, not only the required text, the required curriculum. Now, this is dicey and tricky, because I've got to follow the pacing guide. I've got the curriculum and the standards. I really don't want to mess with that. That's the danger zone. But at the same time, you're teaching kids who would benefit from something a little bit different. And so work with your IEP team, work with your administrators to help support that aim. Here's some strategies for differentiation. One is just to start with a goal, like we would do in special education all the time. What is the goal of what we're working towards for this kid, and how are we going to get there? What is the focus of this instruction? So as I think about, here's what the standard says, here's what the curriculum says, here's the goal that the kid needs to learn. How can I focus my instruction in such a way that it will meet my students' needs? And this is thinking back to the keynote, that intrinsic and extraneous load question. Everything carries intrinsic load with it, okay? And if I've got a kid who's really struggling and their intrinsic load is already going to be super high just to walk through the door with certain content, then my instruction mode, the extraneous load I'm going to add, that's got to be A game. That's got to be really strong. Okay, so I have to be really thoughtful and cognizant about that. And differentiation gives me a good way to remember to do that. I want to give assessments constantly. And this is what I mean when I say I treat it like a process and not treat it like an event. When I collect assessment data, whether it's formal or informal, it puts me in a position to say, what did I just learn from this kid? It's not just a grade that I put in a book. I've gained new information about this kid that gives me an idea of what I should be doing next and how I should support the student. These are questions that I'm always asking myself. What am I teaching? How am I going to teach it? How will I know if the students understand? And who am I teaching? The teacher who's thinking about all of these things is going to be in a position to help support their students. Start slow with this. Okay, so if differentiation, universal design for learning is new to you, take time. Pick out one of these tools and strategies to use, and then add another, and then another. And think about your classroom. Think about the organization of the room. And where do kids sit? How does this facilitate kids' learning needs? And learning preferences to some extent too. How am I going to get kids into groups from this setting? Some tips. Keep files. I know you do this with IEPs, but having access to how kids are performing, the interest profile, knowing what they prefer is something you could have access to and your collaborators can have access to, and portfolios of student work. So again, I'm not just grading them and that's the only thing I look at when evaluating their progress is their score on the Friday afternoon test or quiz that I give. I want to have a portfolio of options to evaluate their learning and performance. Use technology, so high leverage practice number 19. There's so many good ways, formal, informal, assistive, or instructional, to help support students. And this is a great way to differentiate instruction by giving them access to other instruction that might exist online somehow. And this takes a lot of work. You and your school have to sort of make a commitment along with your colleagues to say, differentiation is something we care about, and we need to plan for this. We need to be having PLC and other group kinds of meetings to talk about what's going to be successful. And note that this can be slow. It can be slow going to get a school-wide differentiation initiative going because people have different knowledge about these practices and how to do it. And ultimately, it's just hard work. It takes a lot of time to do the things I'm talking about, as you probably already know. And then finally, your flexibility in thinking about schooling, thinking about assessment, thinking about instruction in a different way to meet the needs of the kid is what's really going to be the linchpin in its success. So as I think about UDL and differentiation, they're similar, they're complementary, they are different. Okay, so the combination of UDL principles and differentiation strategies, this is a strong menu, as we talked about, to draw from when feeding students. And again, I really thought about that as the light apps, okay, to get us rolling with the meal. But when it comes to differentiation and UDL, there's this piece missing, and it's the individualized instruction. So within differentiation, you can individualize. But the folks who are champions and the leading researchers around differentiation, they're not special educators. Okay? So we in special education have to say, I love differentiation. I want teachers doing the things that I just talked about. I want them thinking about different modes of presentation. I want them thinking about different modes of assessment. I want them thinking about different modes of learning and for kids to have a chance to show learning in different ways. I'm on board with 100% of that, but I need to do it with the IEP in mind. What is the specific goals, the specific special education plan that kids need? And that is this. This is the last thing I want to talk about in this presentation today, is specially designed instruction. UDL and differentiation are different than this. They're complementary, They're complementary. It's not like, oh, I'm only doing SDI, I'm not doing UDL. No, you don't. That's not necessary. That's not even a thing. Okay, it's not even. It doesn't even make sense. It makes complete sense to say I'm providing instruction that's individualized based on the IEP, and I'm going to be basing what I do on the clear present level of performance, the disability, what the psychological assessment says, and what the team says this child needs in terms of a specially designed instruction to help support these kids. The way that I do that can and should include those principles of UDL and differentiation that I just went through in the last 30 minutes. This connects really the specially designed instruction to high leverage practice number 11, which is to create short and long-term learning goals. And again, I can't provide short and long-term learning goals if I don't do high leverage practices 1, 2, and 3, which are around collaboration, and high leverage practices 4, 5, and 6, which are around assessment. This is why my lecture on high leverage practices is a very nice complement to both the keynote on cognitive load and the other session on high leverage practices, and this one on differentiation and other types of instruction. Specially designed instruction is so critical because it is the law. Okay, so this is codified. This is language right out of IDEA, the Federal Special Education Law. We in teacher preparation, this is what I'm telling my candidates to do. Okay, I am telling them you need to provide specially designed instruction. When I do professional development like this, I'm yelling at you about how important it is that specially designed instruction be the first and last thing out of your mouth when it comes to thinking about how am I going to provide a high quality level of instruction for these students. And it answers the question, what is special about special education? And the presence and delivery of specially designed instruction is the answer to that question. Every meal, every restaurant you go to, SDI should be something you order. It's a big menu, there's plenty of options, and there's plenty of room for you at this meal when you're ordering the specially designed instruction to order the UDL and differentiation principles to go along with it. But make the IEP the center of what you're doing. And that's what I say here. Just because this is your favorite restaurant, it should be, and now it is, right? That doesn't mean there's not other delicious meals out there for you to order. SDI can and should be shaped by UDL principles. SDI fits nicely within lessons that have already been differentiated for all students. In fact, using those differentiated principles, if that's something you're doing school-wide, because differentiation is something that our general ed colleagues do know about. Okay, they've been learning about this. They don't necessarily know about SDI, but they know about differentiation. So that can be an entry point where you say, hey, we're providing this range of options instructionally and assessment-wise. I need to make sure we're also doing the individual piece for these kids with disabilities as called for in their IEPs. Most general educators I meet with understand that. They get the picture. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. I want to do a little demonstration of what this can look like. Differentiation, UDL, specially designed instruction. Well, it all starts for me with the IEP and the lesson plan template. So I'm thinking about today I'm going to do a lesson on mixtures. This is a science lesson, grade 5. Okay, so by the end of this lesson, kids will know what are mixtures, what are examples of mixtures, how are mixtures made. They'll be able to create their own mixture, explain why it's a mixture, not a compound, why it's not a solution. Okay, and students are going to complete their own Frere model and reflection activity with 100% accuracy. Okay, and if you're not familiar with Frere models, it's sort of a graphic organizer that has students put in the definition in their own words, either find a picture or draw a picture, of the term, they give an example, and they can connect it and explain in their own words how it impacts their life. Okay, so I have choices with this, and this is differentiation. This is UDL. How am I going to go through this and have students construct this graphic organizer? Okay, so I think about my individual students and their individualized needs. And some kids could fill this out on their own. Some kids need my guidance to help fill it out. Others would benefit from working in groups. Okay, some kids need it completely filled out by me. And then they go and do some enrichment around that to give a little bit more activity to it. This is what differentiation is I'm thinking about how am I going to utilize a tool like this to help support all of my students. So as I'm putting together my lesson plan, within my lesson plan are the specific IEP goals. I've got a goal for a student. The student will master key unit vocabulary in content areas by answering in-class questions with 80% accuracy as measured by teacher records and assignments on quizzes with 80% accuracy as reported by records. And I've got some IEP accommodations here, like access to teacher notes, adult assistance, small group for completing assignments, and extended time. This is differentiation and SDI in action. I'm thinking about what are my goals for the lesson, which are here, the objectives. Kids need to learn about mixtures. I've got at least one, but probably more than one student who has an issue learning content area vocabulary. So I know for that kid with a learning disability or behavior disability or autism, intellectual disability, their intrinsic load is going to be high to learn about mixtures. And so I need to be thinking about my instructional plan. How am I going to keep that extraneous load low and keep their active working memory processes high? And so this is why I have a range of assessment options, just like we learned about for differentiation. But I also have a range of materials that I'm going to use. I'm going to use PowerPoint slides, and I'll show you what my slides look like in a minute. I've got materials on hand for a demonstration that I could do, or the kids could do a hands-on lab. Okay, I've got notes that the kids can take, but some kids are going to get the notes handed out to them so they can focus. And I have an explicit instruction plan using the I do, we do, you do instructional sequence. So I've got a plan thinking about keeping extraneous load low for a topic that we're learning about where intrinsic load is high. How can I give these kids enough real-world applications so their long-term schemas can be updated with information I'm giving to them through their working memory inputs? So I'm going to use a range of techniques to do this. I'm not just going to talk at them for 40 minutes and expect they're going to learn it. There's going to be a demo. There's going to be a lab. They're going to work in groups. They're going to fill out a graphic organizer. They're going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Options, 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 which is what differentiation is all about. And then I'm combining it with specially designed instruction, which are things like explicit instruction, where I'm able to say to the kids, hey, everybody, time for science, notebooks open, pencils ready. Today we're going to learn about mixtures. What are we going to learn about today? Mixtures. Okay, great. What do you notice about this bowl? Full of M&Ms. That is kind of delicious. Making me forget about the fries for a second. What do you notice about these M&Ms? Okay, they're all different colors. Great. So are they all the same or are they all different? Well, they're the same on the inside, but the colors are different. Could I pull them apart and have all the red ones, all the green ones, all the orange ones? Okay, so a mixture is sort of something where we have things combined that are similar, but I can still pull them apart. Okay, we don't know what a mixture is yet, but that's a pretty good example of what a mixture is. Let's jump in on this now. And here's the big science question that I want you to answer today. What's the difference between mixtures, elements, and compounds? Okay, now is my demo. So I've got choices. I'm going to think about the unique needs of my specific students. Are they able to do this lab on their own, where they get the coffee filters and the magnets, and the iron fillings and paper clips and other metal things, and use to filter them out of each other so that they're showing that it's a mixture, not a compound? If they're able to do that, that could be one of the great choices I have on my table here. Or, you know what? These kids aren't ready for that. I'm going to do the demonstration myself, and I'll do modeling as it goes on. So I've got choices based on my individual students' needs to hook them in and keep them engaged. Okay, now let's do a review. Now that's done, let's do a review. We've been learning about matter. What is matter? Somebody read this to me. Has mass and takes up space. Okay, right. What are the 3 types of matter? Okay, boom, boom, boom. Good, good, good. What's an atom? So as I go through these slides that I have prepared, okay, and I always present. So you notice, if you've come to my keynote and these other 2 sessions, these slides that I use to teach kids, don't they look exactly like the slides I've been using to provide professional development to you experts and family members in the field? It's exactly the same. It all follows the same model that I understand to keep your cognitive processing low, your extraneous processing low, by giving you rich images for every single slide and a little bit of text to hit on the main idea. And when I teach kids, I do the exact same thing. And I'm marrying it with evidence-based practices like explicit instruction. So I'm providing specially designed instruction to my students, but at the same time, I'm lowering their cognitive load to help them be successful. I'm lowering my cognitive load because I've got all of this information that I want to teach them, including the questions that I want to ask the kids, already put together on these slides that can all help them to be successful. So this is an example of how I use all of these design principles: differentiation, UDL, specially designed instruction, all together, all informed with my knowledge of cognitive load and cognitive overload in order to help students succeed. Thank you so much for tuning in to this and all of the sessions. I hope you've enjoyed and benefited from them, and please let me know if I can be of service in the future. Thank you.